First of all, thank you very much for choosing to listen to my presentation. I want to share with you my method for learning and distilling information and pretty much what I call transforming knowledge into wisdom. I'm not claiming that this is absolute truth or this is an absolute formula that works in all situations and for all people. I do believe that people need to pretty much figure out their unique formula for learning and for distilling principles that work in real life for their life. This is just my take on accelerated learning and how basically how I learn in general. So the topic of my talk is called Solve et Coagula, which is the mental framework that I use to learn fast. Solve et Coagula is a Latin term and a principle from alchemy. Alchemy, as you may know, is the precursor to the modern day science of chemistry. Alchemy had a few elements of science into it, but it was mostly, more magic than science. And that's why I titled my talk, The Alchemy of Turning Knowledge into Wisdom, because I believe that at the end of the day, this process of turning knowledge into wisdom is more magical than it is science. I would not give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for simplicity on the far side of complexity, said Oliver Wendell Holmes. Pretty much life is simple the way we have it today. It may not be optimal, but it's simple. We are just going through the motions. If we start working through the complexity that is reality, and we try to figure out all of the optimal things that make our lives better, on the far side of complexity, life is also simple. What is simple to do is also simple not to do. Basically, in both cases, life has a form of automated nature to it. You do things that are simple now, but not optimal. When you go through this complexity, life on the other side it's also simple, but it's going to be more optimal. And pretty much I use learning and meta learning, to be specific, in order to move from simplicity on this side of complexity to simplicity on the far side of complexity, where life is a bit easier. The formula that I use is solve et coagula. It pretty much means dissolve and coagulate. Solve is taking things apart to see and understand better how they work. If you are familiar with Herbert Simon, he created this term called bounded rationality, which simply states that reality is complex and no human being has the ability to understand all of it, because we might have limited cognitive power, limited perception, limited time, energy, and so on. Therefore, in order to understand the complex thing, it's easier to break it down into its individual components and then try to understand those smaller components. And then this coagula is the assembling. So basically, we assemble back the pieces so that they work more efficiently now. So after we dissolve them, we understand each and every element of these pieces, and then we put them back together in order to create something more optimal. This is fundamentally, like I said, is the formula that I use for meta learning. Meta learning is pretty much learning how to learn. In my opinion, if there is one skill to know in this 21st century, is the ability to learn how to learn. I consider this one of the most fundamental skills that anybody could ever learn, because society is developing at such an accelerated rate, where most of us, if we are at the start of our careers, for example, we might need to reinvent ourselves 2 or 3 times within our lifetimes at least. And with the massive amount of information that is always thrown at us, the ability to learn fast is definitely a superpower, in my opinion. Solve et coagula. This is pretty much the formula. So the solve part, when we break things down into components, for me, it boils down to research, deconstruction, selection, and sequencing. Then the work that goes into understanding complexity is pretty much an iterative process. This iterative process, in most cases, can take like weeks, months, or even years to achieve results. After you have done all of that work, it's time to distill that work into principles, then to reduce and encode them in order to memorize them, or pretty much to embody them so we can live them better. And I'll be going through each of these phases. So I'm going to use as a case study nutrition. Like I just want to mention again, this is my view on nutrition, how I distilled information and how I made it work for my particular situation. There is nothing that our health and fitness does not touch. So a win there is definitely a win everywhere. For me, the process took approximately 6 to 7 years to achieve what I now call simplicity on the far side of complexity for my nutrition in general. So let's go with the first phase, the solve. So in solve, we have research, deconstruction, selection, and sequencing. So the research and deconstruction pretty much boils down to this idea of finding highly relevant content, high density content, or content that it's most likely going to help me to understand the things that I'm trying to understand. I do this pretty much via like on Amazon search to see which are the books that stood the test of time, or books that have the most number of reviews and that people got value out of them. So on the screen, you will see 5 examples, but I have read somewhere between 20 and 30 books on nutrition. And of course, I've done a lot of courses as well. So this is just for illustration purposes. After reading all of that material, it's time for selection. And when I started diving deep into this idea, keeping in mind that I try to fix my food, right? I saw that for health in general, pretty much it boils down to food, movement, sleep, water, and air. And then the sequencing, for me, sequencing pretty much means what will give me the most bang for my buck. What's something very simple, but once fixed, it actually adds exponential results. So when you look at how biology works, the sequencing will be pretty much solved for you already. We cannot live that long without air. Then we live 2 to 3 days without water, 4 to 5 days without sleep. Food, you can go up to a month. And then the last one will be movement. So sequencing is pretty much air, water, sleep, food, movement, which pretty much told me that in order to solve my nutrition, actually, there are 3 other things more important than that I need to get in check first. Right, air, for example, this idea of rhythmic breathing. If constantly you are breathing like really hard, it gives the body this idea that it's in a constant fight or flight. So that creates stress. Water, if you are not properly hydrated, then all bodily functions start to break down really fast. And of course, sleep, similar body functions start to break down really fast. But another one is without adequate sleep, the level of cortisol in your body will increase rapidly. And with that level of cortisol, releasing weight or getting rid of weight becomes a very difficult task. And of course, a win anywhere is a win everywhere. Any type of, any element of this that you fix, you will see results. Now, about the nutrition in particular, the selection was also quite simple in my opinion. It boiled down to the macros, so the macronutrients, micronutrients, the food source, where you get your food from, the frequency of your meals, and the hunger type. Then I started analyzing again what gives me the most bang for my buck. And the sequencing for me was very simple. It was number 1 was hunger type. Most hunger is actually emotional, not nutritional. Second is the food source, so the type of food that you are eating. Then it's going to be the macros, the micros, and the frequency. So that was the solve part. We did the research, we did the deconstruction, we selected the most important things that we need to tackle, and then we sequenced them, we put them in order. Now comes the hard work, this iterative process of trying to see the elements that we learn from the books, how can we apply them to our lives? So for me, the iterative process pretty much starts with a hypothesis. So this can be something that I write down for me to test, or it's a model that I already picked from a book or a course, and I try to apply it to my life. Then, of course, I take action on it, and inevitably it will face a failure point, right? If something doesn't work out, I don't stick with it for long, any type of friction that might be created here. Then it comes a diagnosis, where I pretty much say, okay, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? This creates some new learnings. I'm like, okay, I figured out this thing is that I did wrong, or this one didn't work. And then I improve the hypothesis. I just tweak on my model, and that becomes the new hypothesis. And this circle repeats. I take action. There's going to be another failure point, and I repeat and I repeat and I repeat. And at one point, it will literally work from hypothesis action directly to the result that I want. Like I said, this process takes time. This is the part of the method which is called the scientific worldview. In my opinion, everything is a hypothesis to be tested. I don't expect anyone to hand me a model that will work directly for my life and for every circumstance in my life. Therefore, everything is a hypothesis to be tested. There is no failure when it comes to hypothesis, only failure to learn. So if we fail to learn something through that process of diagnosing our failures, only that will be a failure, in my opinion, the failure to learn. And of course, for me, failure plus reflection equals progress. Failure minus that reflection equals stagnation. So here are a couple of hypotheses that I have used. So these are just 4 examples: the slow carb diet, the well-fed diet, ketogenic diet, and Mediterranean diet. But of course, I have tried also others as well. I put down just a few principles from these diets just for illustration again, but I do understand there are actually a lot more rules to these particular methodologies or ideas around nutrition. So I pretty much take one of them, like for example, the slow carb diet, and then I go through the action, to the failure point, new learnings, improve, and so on and so forth. The main idea here is that you need to make it uniquely yours. So what this means is that it has to create real world results. In my opinion, models, systems, habits, ideas, anything that does not change your behavior, it's pretty much useless. So, and how you make things to change your behavior, you need to make them uniquely yours. You need to adapt them to the circumstances that create you, your proclivities, your desires, your schedule, your propensity to do something and not other things, maybe some biological limitations. That's why it's a very long process in some cases. But if you make it uniquely yours, and then you see that it brings real world results, then you know you have a winner. So here's an example. After going through that iterative process for all of these different diets, I pretty much figured out that, for example, from the slow carb diet, I like this idea of don't drink calories. I'm able to stick with it. I like the idea of a cheat day that I actually then converted into a cheat meal. So once a week, I actually pig out on absolutely everything that I want. No holds bar kind of deal. From WildFit, I really like this idea of food awareness and mindset around food. So being aware of why you eat what you eat. And I really like this idea of eating seasonal foods, so foods that are in season. From the ketogenic diet, I didn't resonate with a lot of the principles there. But I really love this idea of intermittent fasting. I consider it to be very useful and valuable. And then I saw that I actually incorporated it in my life. So I picked that one. And from the Mediterranean diet, I actually picked more things. So this was the one diet that seemed to fit my my taste buds and my lifestyle the most. So I picked a lot of elements here, from whole grain and healthy fats to reducing red meat to enjoying some dairy and spice it up, as in using a lot of spices because I love them. So again, we went through the solve, we did the research, the deconstruction, the selection, the sequencing, then this long process, the iterative process, which we adapted these models and we saw things that worked in our life. Now that we distilled these ideas, it's time to convert them into principles. So easy things that we can hold in our minds, or a prescriptive list of principles that we can write down. And then we're going to go and reduce and encode them, basically the coagulate part, where we bring all of this knowledge together, we condense it, and then we live it. These are a few of the principles that I have around nutrition. Listen to my body. This is basically about awareness. Diet is how you eat every day. So for example, why most diets fail is because there is this idea of I'm going to be a month on a diet. No, diet is how you eat for decades. So for me, when I looked at diet, I was like, okay, I have to figure out a way to eat that is healthy, that I can do for decades. Emotional versus nutritional. Most hunger is actually emotional or linked to around habits in your lives, not necessarily because your body is lacking nutrients. If you eat food, you must make sure that it's nutritionally dense and easily digestible. You are what you consistently eat. This is something that I believe. So that one meal a week that I pretty much pig out on anything that I want. If you have 3 meals per day, that's fundamentally like 1 meal out of 21 meals. So I consider it to not have that effect, that big of a negative effect. You cannot outrun the fork. This is fundamentally around this idea that everything starts with nutrition. Most people try to sweat it out in the gym, but you cannot, in a normal day, you cannot outrun what you eat. There was this article that I read that if you drink 2 beers, you will need the equivalent of walking or running around 14 kilometers or around 10 miles in order to burn off those calories. So you cannot outrun the fork. Diversity of macronutrients, food intake, weekly versus daily. There are a lot of these macronutrients and micronutrients and things that we need to hit. And when I saw that if you think about it in terms of a day, it turns out to be like a lot of food. And I didn't like that principle at all because I couldn't do it and I couldn't eat that much. But when I flipped it and I transformed it into what I eat in a week, I saw that I can hit all of those major groups, no problems. Food, if it comes from a plant, is good. If it's made in a plant, then it's bad. It's a very simple heuristic. Don't drink calories, so sugary, fizzy drinks, things like this. Add a lot of intentional movements, and calorie restriction extends life. This is the idea of intermittent fasting. If there is one consistent thing that I saw in many of the longevity studies and articles that I read is this idea of calorie restriction, that it extends life, aka eat less, right? Now that we have these principles, still we distill a lot of information, there are still principles, but then we need to reduce them even more. So I reduce and I encode them into a way that I can actually understand and hold it in my mind all the time, right? So for me, this is my personal golden rule for food. This is the simplicity on the far side of complexity. Eat real food, diversified, 80% full, fast occasionally. That's all the thing that I know about nutrition. I distilled it in this 10 words here. And for example, you'll see that eating real food, then this one I can break it down then and I can talk about the principles around the eat real food. And then these principles I can expand more into the information that I knew, that I learned along the years about that thing, right? Because if you know how memory works through a process of encoding. So you encode the information, then you store it into your mind, and then you need a method of retrieval, right? So for me, this would be, this is how I'm able to remember a lot of things and a lot of facts and basically information. I encode it, then I memorize it like this, and then I retrieve it. For example, I wanted to show that even this idea of solve et coagula, which is my golden rule for accelerated learning, it's also it's exactly exactly this thing as well, where I break it down into principles, the 2 elements, and then I can talk individually about them. So as you can see, this presentation is also a meta presentation on the principles of meta learning itself. You can apply this method to pretty much anything that you want to learn. This brings me to this idea of knowledge versus wisdom. This is a quote from one of my favorite books by Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. It said, "Wisdom cannot be imparted. Knowledge can be communicated, but not wisdom. One can find it, live it, do wonders through it, but one cannot communicate and teach it." For me, knowledge is on one side of this simplicity, on the far side of complexity curve. So knowledge is everything that you can manage to get in terms of information, but you then have to go through this process, this iterative process, to make that knowledge into something that is truly yours. So for example, this is knowledge. Every model and system that you can find in books. For example, this can be some other person's wisdom, but they have lived it. And for you, it cannot be anything else but just knowledge or systems or models. You still need to take it, apply it, and make it yours. So this books, for example, this is knowledge. Wisdom is this idea that you distill all of that information into something that is truly yours. For me, wisdom is nothing more than embodied action. By embodied action, I mean there is no discrepancy between the things that you say and how you live. So there is a congruency between what you preach and how you live, right? In a more poetic way, you bear the metaphorical scars of the words that you are saying, right? You are a living embodiment of what you are saying. This for me is wisdom. You have gone through the entire process. You have made that knowledge uniquely yours. You are living it every day. Therefore, you are embodying what you are saying. Therefore, there is no secret for me. To transform knowledge into wisdom, it's pretty much an idea of clarity of aim times consistency. So running through this process consistently, and of course, patience, the long lost art of patience. In other words, little by little over time, it turns into a mountain. Of course, this is also a short encoded message that I also use. This little sentence pretty much encapsulates everything that I know about habit formation over time. Little by little, it means breaking things down and doing little habits and choices every single day. Over time means having consistency over a long period of time. And it turns into a mountain pretty much over a period of time that those little actions turn into something big and that can stand for a lifetime. So if you are interested to learn more about this process of meta learning, here are 4 resources that I suggest. One is Learning How to Learn by Barbara Oakley. She also has a course, an online course on Coursera that you can take for free. 4-Hour Chef by Timothy Ferriss. The first part of the book is actually about accelerated learning, and the rest of the book is about becoming the 4-Hour Chef. Then another one is the first 20 hours by Josh Kaufman. It's about, again, accelerated learning, how to pick up any skill in 20 hours or less, and The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. Other books that can be complementary to this is Principles by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio talks about a similar iterative process there where he distilled the things that he learned in his life and he transformed them into principles, ergo the name of the book. Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer is a book on memory techniques and memory principles, how to improve your memory. Indistractable by Nir Eyal teaches, of course, how to become indistractable in this world. And Deep Work by Cal Newport teaches about this idea of sitting long with a problem, being able to do deep work, which is often necessary in order to achieve any result. That's all. That was my presentation. I hope you found it valuable. Thank you very much for watching. All that is left for me to say is don't underestimate small daily actions and choices because they do add up to a great life over time. Thank you very much for watching till the end. Hope you found this topic interesting. Share it with others if you think they might find value in it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to watch more videos about understanding ourselves, about understanding reality and our place in it, and my quest to craft a holistic, anti-fragile lifestyle from the ground up. And if you want to know what to watch next, you can check this video over here. By the way, these suggestions will get better and better as I create more great content. Till next time, take care. Bye-bye.